why don't we just get the big one out of the way? The one that I think probably caused the most discussion online, I think, especially. And also gave Shonen Jump a lot of retweets and favorites. I should have looked it up again, but like I think the last time I looked on that tweet for the Death Note one shot in particular, it was like well over like 100K retweets or favorites. I forget. It was some really high number. I'll have to like double check on that. But I know that tweet in particular got a lot of attention.
Yeah, a lot of viral tweets came out of screen capping panels from this one shot. And indeed, I can't think of a better note to begin on than this new Death Note one shot. It is certainly a lengthy one. It's certainly a nice surprise. It's been about 10, 12 years since the last Death Note manga material, so this is kind of a nice, interesting way to start off the new year. And it's also kind of interesting in terms of its premise because it's Death Note in the modern day, kind of looking back and thinking about the original premise of Death Note can't work today in the surveillance state society we now live in because there are cameras and all sorts of surveillance tech monitoring our every movement and everything we say. So how do you actually pull off using the Death Note? And I would say that Oba found a very clever solution, or at least a clever twist and spin on how to do a Death Note story in the modern day.
Okay, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I found the tweet now. So Shonen Jump's Death Note advertising this Death Note one shot got 16,500 retweets and over 46,000 likes. So I'm pretty sure that's like the most they've ever gotten on one of these tweets advertising new additions to new chapters to the vault. So that's pretty amazing.
I imagined it's got a lot of traffic. It probably is the most trafficked chapter on their site, and certainly it is on Manga Plus, though that is also because Manga Plus kind of restarted its whole popularity counting metric, so it's a little skewed in its favor in that case, but it's still quite significant.
Oh, see, I didn't know that. That's interesting. I promise we'll talk about the actual one shot in a second, but like I can only imagine like how much traffic this hopefully brought to the Shonen Jump app and Manga Plus maybe. Like, I hope this did well for them.
I mean, on Manga Plus, it is currently at 872,817 views. So that is quite a significant amount of views, and you can only imagine how much more traffic the Viz release of the chapter also got. So I think it's quite easy to say that between the two sites that over 1 million people have read this chapter, which speaks to the enduring popularity and mass appeal of Death Note, I would say.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I can only imagine how many people like went out of their way to download like the Shonen Jump app probably to read this thing, which is pretty cool, but they probably saw like a huge spike in downloads that day. But yeah, no, so this one shot in particular, I mean unfortunately like I didn't get to read this like the day it came out, so like I was aware of some things going in, which we'll probably talk about in a bit.
Very quickly, people spoiled some of the most sensational parts of the chapter.
Yeah.
Including the appearance of a very, prominent political figure.
Yeah, whose name rhymes with Ronald Thump.
We don't need to sugarcoat it. It's Donald Trump.
No, I was trying to be funny.
The actual political figures make appearances in this chapter.
Mm-hmm. No, I get you. Every time I say his name, I just get this feeling, like it just doesn't feel good. Anyway, so yeah, this I was aware of some things going into the one shot, but like I wasn't spoiled on everything, thankfully. Like I didn't see the ending coming, which I know I saw some discourse on. I don't think everybody really liked the way it ended. Personally, I thought it ended just fine.
Yeah, I mean, it's established in the main series itself that everyone who uses a Death Note will die and they won't go to the afterlife. Like, that's a rule from the original Death Note. It doesn't matter how you use the Death Note. If you use the Death Note, if you're in possession of it, you are going to die. So, that makes sense.
Yeah, so in that sense, like, I thought it actually ended really well, and I thought it was a pretty decent twist, actually. Like, I really thought that our main character here was gonna make it out unscathed, and let's just say that's not the case, unfortunately.
I do think it's a little cheap, the twist towards the end, just because he had no awareness that the rules were going to be changed against his favor. But it is a bit of his own hubris that did him in, because he did tell Ryuk not to ever speak to him again. So that one flaw in his line of thinking was his undoing. So I do appreciate on that perspective, but it does feel a little, well, he couldn't have possibly have predicted that the Shinigami King would force Ryuk to change the rules.
Yeah, I don't know, like, I don't know what I have to say about the one shot in particular, other than I thought it was written very well. Like, I thought the logic of it all made sense for the most part. I didn't pick up on anything that, like, I didn't think couldn't work. I just like seeing the Death Note used in a way that didn't involve just killing people. I actually thought that was kind of clever.
That's the most interesting part of the one-shot to me, is that they were able to write a Death Note story in which the power of the Death Note isn't used at all. Rather, someone is able to figure out how to use the Death Note without actually writing in it to get what he wants. Which I actually thought was very interesting.
For sure.
Because it's not what you would expect from a Death Note story, but it makes use of some of the rules beyond the rules involving killing in very fun ways.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, in general, I thought this made for a very good Death Note story, and it was the kind of thing that made me think, like, you know, like, because I know there are people out there who really want, like, a continuation of the Death Note, but personally, I don't think a sequel series could ever work, or at the very least, it'd be hard to come up with something that, feasible, you know what I mean?
I mean, they say explicitly in this chapter that Death Note can't really be done the same way today, because, again, we're being monitored all the time. Like, there's so many cameras everywhere. It's very easy to hack into computers and listen in on conversations. Like, it is so easy for government agents to figure out who Kira would be in modern day. So you can't really do the Death Note story the same way today. So, like, how Minoru was able to use the power in this story was that he very barely had Ryuk show up anywhere. Like, it was very simple, and the simplicity was its invincibility. Because they couldn't monitor Ryuk when he was traveling underground, and all he was doing was holding up a piece of paper. He executed his plan in such a way that nothing could be traced back to one specific person, traced back to him. Because he ultimately distributed at first he made great use of social media, and then he made sure, like, the scale escalated to the point where it couldn't be just individual people exchanging money. Now it was, like, in the hands of a government power, and then he had, like, the money distributed across hundreds of thousands of different people. So there's no way to pinpoint one specific person who had the Death Note. And so, like, the simplicity of his plan was basically why they couldn't do anything about it. I will say, though, that Nier didn't even try and was completely useless. Like, he gave up very easily. Immediately he gave up. The minute he saw that Ryuk was traveling underground, he was like, well, there is nothing I can do. Because there's no way to find out where Ryuk is going. He could have, though. He could have thought about it logically and say, well, like, what could be the range of where Ryuk is traveling to? It still has to be someone in Japan. He could have figured out it was someone in Tokyo still. He could have, again, he could have easily hacked into people's computers all around Tokyo and spied in on conversations, because Minoru was still talking to Ryuk in his room and stuff, so there were ways to still figure it out. I mean, Nier could have put in some effort, but in any case, it was still not that much the point where it was like a cat and mouse. Oh, Nier is going to figure out Minoru's plan. It's just like us as the readers are kind of trying to figure out what he's going for, and then like being surprised that, oh, so that was what he was thinking all along, which was still pretty fun. But I do find it amusing that Nier, who was so perfectly clairvoyant in all his assumptions and theories in the main story, is now just completely useless and completely gives up. Like the first minute there's a complication, and then completely gives up on the idea of even possessing the net node, because apparently he's now very patriotic, which is very anti-L, who did not belong to one nation or a country, so.
Yeah, that is kind of weird. Yeah, I was actually just about to ask, do you think this one shot could have worked just as well without Nier's involvement at all?
Yeah, he didn't need to be there. He didn't do anything, again. Like, he was just a sideline commentator. He was just there for the cameo. Matsuda did more by way of messing up and kind of legitimizing the fact that the power being distributed was real. Like,
that's
if
Matsuda
anything,
for
Matsuda
you.
was the only character who needed to be in this chapter from the original series besides Ryuk, because he's the only one who actually affected the plot in a meaningful way.
Look, it's like I told you, Matsuda's the guy. He's my guy. He needed to, like, it all comes back to Matsuda.
I mean, he's a great character, though. I mean, in this case, he messed up, but
he still served the
enjoyed
purpose.
seeing him. Yeah, again, he was very much a good part of the plot. Like, he fit in well. Like, no other character would have done what he did that would have gotten the ball rolling in the same way.
Oh man, yeah, seriously. Yeah, I mean, I guess is there anything else we want to bring up? Like, it's weird. I feel like I should have more to say about this one shot, at least on my end. But like, I don't know. I just thought it was a good Death Note story, like done really well.
Yeah, I found it quite enjoyable. There are some things that I do find strange about it, and I'm not entirely on board with. A lot of it does boil down to kind of some of Oba's political perspective seeping in there, but also I will speak towards a reaction I've seen people have towards the character of Minoru, saying that he was very charitable. Oh, what a good guy. He distributed the wealth around to all the people of Tokyo. I will say that his plan involved, again, taking like trillions of dollars from the United States, which, all that money comes from taxes, and comes from taxes on lower income people, especially. So when you think about how the United States government would pay for it, that would really harm the lower income people in the United States. So from that perspective, he really hurt a lot of people. But another side of it is that, it was still towards his own end of getting, like, more than enough money that he would reasonably earn in his lifetime through this plan.
Yeah.
So it was mostly still just a cover. I don't really feel Minoru was, like, really righteous in distributing the wealth around. I mean, this entire scheme of his, he concocted 2 years prior to enacting it, knowing that he would need a account with the specific bank in Tokyo that he eventually gets an account with. And as a junior high student, he wouldn't have been able to get that, but as like a high school student, he would have. So that was kind of the whole reason for the 2-year delay in of itself. So on that note, I will say that Minoru is still a very morally not upright character. He's not a murderer like Yagami, but he is still very selfish and serving his own ends through the Death Note. I mean, because again, giving the Death Note to the United States, especially Donald Trump, that actually exchanged hands, a lot of people were gonna die, so it was not the ethically responsible thing to do.
Not really, no, but I guess it just goes to show that even if you don't have the intention to kill people with the Death Note somehow seems to bring out, it'll still bring out the worst in you, somehow, some way.
Mm-hmm. In terms of, like, the whole idea of taking trillions of dollars from the United States to boost the economy of Japan by distributing it to a specific group of people in Tokyo, there is a bit of what I feel is some of Oba's nationalism in there. That is also kind of, I feel, reflected in how Shinzo Abe is kind of depicted, saying that, oh, yeah, it's so obvious that there's no country that is not going to accept the Death Note if they can. So why even try? And so kind of portraying him as kind of savvy in that way. So yeah, there's some stuff in there that I'm like, I will say, though, that Oba's sexism is thankfully absent from this chapter by virtue of there being no female characters with an actual role. But, that's at least we're free of some misogyny, so I can appreciate that.
I was gonna say, like, in this case, I would much rather just have no prominent female characters at all than badly written ones.
Yeah.
Which still really sucks to say, but, I mean, yeah.
I will say, I really do appreciate Ryuk's jab at Trump when Trump realizes that he can't take the Death Note because he will die. And so he's like, no, I'm not going to take it. And Ryuk is like, right. You value your life over your country. That was a good dig. I appreciated that.
Yeah, that was.
And then when Trump gives his whole plan of like, but I'm going to say I'm going to have it anyway, essentially lying. And Ryuk is like, oh, very savvy, Mr. President. That was very amusing indeed.
Overall, I think we're pretty positive on it, though.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. For the most part, it's an interesting story. And again, it plays with the Death Note rules in a really unique way that I didn't even think that Oba would go for, like when I first heard there was going to be a new Death Note one-shot. So I really appreciate the surprise of it. Mm-hmm. And speaking towards the potential of new Death Note stories, I would be interested perhaps in an anthology-style format of new Death Note stories where it's episodic, Ryuk gives a Death Note to someone, we'll see how they use it. And I'm sure none of them would get as far as Light, and that's kind of how it would work as an anthology, is that they would get caught, and that the Death Note would change hands. But I do think that there'd be potential in that format of storytelling in the Death Note universe.
Yeah, I think so.